Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining. I am Joe Peterson. I'm the Chief Analyst at ClearTech Loop, and I'm here today with our ClearTech Loop podcast, In the Know, on the Move. I'm here with my friend Robert Uno, Global CISO. Hi, Robert.
Hi, Joe. Thank you for the invite. Good to see you again.
You too. Thanks so much for joining. So, in case you haven't joined us before, ClearTech Loop is a focused podcast series. We're delivering sharp, real-time insights at the intersection of cybersecurity, cloud, and AI security. And we visit with guests using a 3-question lens so that we cut through the noise and provide a clear perspective from the front lines of transformation. Robert, tell us a little bit about your role as a CISO today and your previous roles as a CISO.
Well, thank you, Joe. So right now, what I do is I'm a global CISO for a cybersecurity firm, which I started it with a couple of other people. So we go around the country and provide safeguards to companies, whether they're small to medium sized to large organizations, about some of the cybersecurity technology that they can utilize. Previously, I was a CISO for a large retail firm. Been around the block a few years, over 20 years that I've done. I have quite a bit of experience starting from, anything that deals with electricity, banking, and quite a few others that have made me very resilient in this field.
So, external and internal resilience, right?
That is correct, Joe. You know
Yeah,
me, you
I
know how things
do.
are. So thank you
I
for that.
do. I'm lucky enough to have worked with you professionally and developed a friendship with you personally. So let's jump into the first question, Robert. From a CISO's perspective, how should you be thinking about cyber risk in terms of dollars and business impact?
One thing about this, I deal with this. I'm actually getting ready for a board meeting to discuss exactly this. You got to be able to quantify the risk. A CEO, CFO doesn't look at risk the same way that we look at it in cybersecurity. We look at it like an oh God moment. They look at it as how much is it going to cost me?
Mm.
So what you got to do is you got to be able to quantify those things that you are trying to protect. And once you have a number and you see the business impact that it has, because that is what matters here. What is the business impact? Put it into a number that they can understand, they can see the investment, and let them make the decision whether it should be done or not. I'll give you an example. One of our clients right now, we're looking at spending about $600,000 worth of cybersecurity tools, and they wanted to know what was the risk. We went through an impact analysis.
Mhm.
It's about a $4.5 million risk. They're an online business, basically, and 3 days worth of downtime is $4.5 million. It was that simple. So, the CEO looked at it and said, well, I don't think I have much of a choice here. For $600,000, you're mitigating the risk. And that's basically how all of us should be looking at it, specifically those of us as CISOs in this space.
That's a really good point, because what I'm hearing you say is that if you don't understand the other executives' perspective and aren't speaking to them in their language or a language that they can understand, then you're going to have a really hard time um, providing cybersecurity value holistically to the organization.
That is correct. And it's always good that from a cyber security perspective, work with the finance people whenever they're putting solutions in place. Make sure risk and the quantifiable risk is part of the ROI. Because a lot of the times when you add that to it, you tend to say maybe this project isn't worth it comparatively without it.
And you kind of answered the second question already in your explanation of quantifying risk and overall financial risk models. So let me move on to the third question, because we can't do a podcast in 2025 without saying the word AI. You already started laughing, right? So I'm not quite sure the way you look at it, but I always think of AI, at least in terms of cybersecurity, as two-headed. We've got AI that we use in our tools to secure emerging threats. And then we've got, from a CISO's perspective, the organizational governance piece. How should CISOs be thinking about AI adoption in terms of those two parts of the same puzzle?
Joe, the one thing about AI is a what I call a double-headed monster, right? When you really look
Yeah.
at it, and it's a double-edged sword also. So one of the best things that could happen, and it's one of the worst things that could happen if you don't take the right measures into place. It's like any sword with double edge. You have to know how to use it at the end of the
Mm.
day, right? One of the things is if you look at it from a cybersecurity perspective, we can detect things a lot quicker now. There is no way, Joe, that any human being, at least the ones that I know, can look at something as quickly as an AI model can. On that, for cybersecurity has become heaven sent. On the other hand, for the criminals, it's done the exact same thing.
Mm.
It gives them the ability to be able to do bad things a lot quicker with less errors that you have.
Mhm.
So from that perspective, we have to make sure that we know about it. We implement some of the solutions into our detection tools to ensure that we stay ahead of the game. The worst thing that anybody can do in AI is not do anything about it and wait and see. I mean, Moore's law tells you that the speed of computers move faster every 18 months. Moore's law for AI is a lot quicker. Whatever you saw 6 months ago is not the same in AI 6 months later, and it won't be the same in 6 months. So that's why you have to stay ahead of it and be part of that evolution. So any tools that you want to look at, right? You have to make sure that they get augmented defense, for on the threat detection, the phishing, the prevention, and then the incident response. The SOAR is a perfect platform that tends to do that. Those platforms tend to actually do that sort of a thing. You also, from a company perspective, now you got to take the governance approach to protect the company. Because if you don't have any governance for AI, there's going to be issues. So you have to make sure that in the transparency of it, how are you going to use AI in your company? What's acceptable use, right? You got to make sure that you also check your biases. Don't forget, some of this AI, sometimes it can go nuts. It doesn't give you the right information that you're expecting. So how are you going to check that that's going to happen? What is what I call the bias check? I have a company that asked me that the information that we're getting out of AI wasn't what they were expecting.
Mm.
Well, part of it is the way they had gotten the model to work
Mhm.
wasn't exactly how they started in the wrong way.
Mhm.
So, because they didn't have the governance, I asked them, well,
Mhm.
what's your governance model? So, it can really give you some real wrong answers, the same way it can give you some great answers, but you got to have that governance on it. The other thing is you need to know what you can put out into the model, because anything that goes into the cyberspace will be discovered. And the model is hungry for information. So it's always going to try to grab as much information. So you got to have your data protection. How are you protecting that data? Is extremely important. And when do you protect the data? At the input level. That's why the governance model it's so important. I mean, I have yet to see an AI that goes around and says, "Hey, let me find that data, let me eat it." It doesn't work that way. We as humans put it into it. That's why governance, I'm a very big deal on that. And you have to align it, right, with privacy laws, like GDPR and CCPA and so on and so forth, right? You got to make sure that that's all part of your governance model. And whatever model you're coming up with now, your governance, going to change in 6 months. I guarantee you. I guarantee you about that. And the last thing is make your AI part of your risk register.
Yep.
You have to make sure that you work with legal, that you work with your risk department and compliance to monitor the usage and the risk. Because if not, we go back to the first question you asked me. How much is it going to cost you an issue with AI that you want to utilize? And that should all be part of the whole thing. So hopefully, Joe, that provides you a little bit of my thought process or how I think of it. And
It-
I get together with quite a few executives when we talk about this. You're asking the same questions they're asking overall.
That's good to know that the questions are relevant, and I'm going to be waiting for your next book, Moore's Law of AI, coming out
Oh,
soon.
yeah, sure. The one thing, take this into consideration, that at the end of the day, our job as CISOs, we're no longer just technologists. We're actually business risk managers.
You are.
And the minute that you start to think of it that way, the solutions that you're going to come up with will be a lot better. But what's
Mhm.
even more, you're going to get the support from your executive team because they understand that you're looking at the cost from a business perspective, not from you putting some the latest and greatest tool out there.
Yeah, that's it. You're part of the C-suite and you're part of the business strategy, and that's a really
Yeah.
good point. So thank you so much for taking time today, and I'll let you get off to your board meeting.
Joe, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Have a great day.
All right, take care.
Bye.